Well. Look who's back for another episode of How Did We Get Here? I'm your host, and today we're taking a little break from our usual royal drama. Because let's face it, when the President of the United States can't remember if he needs to follow the Constitution, even King Charles's palace intrigue starts looking like amateur hour. That's right, folks. We're diving headfirst into the political dumpster fire that is Donald Trump's brain in 2025. And before you roll your eyes and think, oh great, another Trump video, let me stop you right there. This isn't about politics. This isn't about left versus right. This is about a 78-year-old man with access to nuclear codes who recently said, and I quote, "I don't know," when asked if he needs to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Let that sink in for a moment. The Constitution. The document he swore to preserve, protect, and defend just 4 months ago. The same Constitution that literally defines his job description. And his response? I don't know. Houston, we have a problem. And that problem might just be sitting in the Oval Office, struggling to remember what country he's supposed to be running. The constitutional crisis. So let's set the scene, shall we? It's May 4th, 2025. Trump sits down with NBC's Kristen Welker for what should have been a routine interview about his first 100 days back in office. You know, the usual presidential stuff. Policy wins, future plans, maybe a little bragging about crowd sizes. Standard Trump fare. But then Welker does something absolutely radical in modern journalism. She asks a follow-up question. The audacity. They're discussing Trump's deportation policies when she asks if everyone deserves due process under the Fifth Amendment. Trump's response? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. Now here's where it gets really spicy. Welker, bless her journalistic heart, doesn't let it slide. She points out that the Fifth Amendment literally guarantees due process for all persons, not just citizens, but all persons. Trump's comeback? Still, I don't know. But wait, there's more. Because apparently admitting ignorance about basic constitutional rights wasn't embarrassing enough. Welker then asks the money question. Don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president? And ladies and gentlemen, this is where our story takes a turn from concerning to absolutely terrifying. Trump's response? You guessed it. I don't know. I'm sorry, what? You don't know. Sir, you literally raised your right hand 4 months ago and recited an oath that specifically requires you to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Were you having an out-of-body experience during your own inauguration? The Monroe Doctrine meltdown. But folks, that's not even the worst part. Oh no, we're just getting warmed up. Because just 2 weeks later, on May 20th, Trump gave us what might go down as the single most embarrassing presidential moment since his last embarrassing presidential moment. Picture this. Trump is in the Oval Office announcing his shiny new $175 billion Golden Dome missile defense system. Very presidential, very important stuff. But then, because Trump can never resist showing off, he decides to give everyone a little history lesson about the presidential portraits hanging around his desk. He starts strong, identifies the first 2 presidents without breaking a sweat. But then he gets to James Monroe, and suddenly it's like watching a 5th grader who didn't study for the history test. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the Monroe Doctrine, one of the most fundamental foreign policy principles in American history. The doctrine that basically told European powers to stay out of the Americas. It's covered in literally every 8th grade history class in America. And the President of the United States couldn't remember the name. He called it the Monroe Document, like it's some random paperwork Monroe left on his desk. Hey, have you seen that Monroe Document around here somewhere? I think I left it next to my Big Mac wrapper. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Come on, everyone has brain farts. Sure, we all forget words sometimes, but there's a difference between forgetting where you put your car keys and forgetting the foundational principles of American foreign policy while you're literally sitting in the office that implements those policies. The medical expert avalanche. And apparently, I'm not the only one who's noticed Trump's little memory issues, because it turns out that 50 of the most renowned forensic psychiatrists, neuropsychiatrists, and dementia specialists in the country have signed a statement expressing concerns about Trump's cognitive state. These aren't political hacks or random Twitter doctors. These are serious medical professionals who specialize in exactly this kind of thing. And they're seeing what they describe as deterioration in language skills, such as simpler vocabulary, incomplete and incoherent sentences, grammatical errors, and paraphasias. That's when you substitute the wrong words, like saying document instead of doctrine. They also noted impaired memory and recall, such as confabulation, where memory gaps are filled with false or fabricated details. Sound familiar? And tangential thinking, where speech often drifts to unrelated topics in an erratic manner. Anyone who's ever listened to a Trump rally knows exactly what they're talking about. But here's the kicker, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable. Dementia literally runs in Trump's family. His father, Fred Trump, developed Alzheimer's disease. And if you know anything about dementia, you know that genetics play a significant role. Now, Trump did take a cognitive assessment back in 2018, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, or MOCA test. He bragged about getting a perfect score of 30 out of 30, but here's the thing about the MOCA test. It's designed to catch severe cognitive impairment. It's questions like, what year is it? And draw a clock. It's not exactly the SATs. Passing the MOCA test is like bragging that you successfully tied your shoes this morning. It's the bare minimum proof that your brain is still functioning at a basic level. And Trump was so proud of this achievement that he wouldn't shut up about it for months. The family history nobody talks about. Let's talk about something that makes this whole situation even more unsettling. The Trump family's relationship with cognitive decline. Because this isn't just about one man's mental state. It's a pattern that goes back generations. Trump's father, Fred Trump, didn't just have Alzheimer's. He had a particularly aggressive form that left him unable to recognize his own family members in his final years. And if you've ever dealt with a family member who has dementia, you know it doesn't just appear overnight. There are warning signs, subtle changes that happen gradually over time. Simpler vocabulary? Check. Trump's speeches have demonstrably become less complex over the years. Researchers have actually analyzed his language patterns and found a significant decline in sentence structure and vocabulary complexity since the 1980s. Confabulation, filling memory gaps with false details. Oh boy, where do we even start? Trump's relationship with factual accuracy has always been complicated, but lately it's moved beyond just lying into the realm of genuinely not seeming to know what's true anymore. Tangential thinking and drifting between unrelated topics. Have you heard his recent rallies? The man starts talking about immigration and somehow ends up discussing the superior water pressure in his shower. It's like his brain is a browser with 47 tabs open, and half of them are playing different songs. And then there's the repetition. If you've ever spent time with someone in the early stages of dementia, you know about the repetition. The same stories, the same phrases, the same complaints over and over again. Sound familiar? How many times have we heard about the greatest crowd ever, or nobody's seen anything like it? But here's what's really scary. Trump is showing these signs while still having access to the nuclear codes, while still making decisions that affect millions of lives, while still being the guy who's supposed to, uphold the Constitution that he apparently doesn't know he needs to uphold. The White House damage control. Now you might be wondering, surely the White House has noticed this, right? Surely someone in his inner circle is paying attention to the fact that the president can't remember basic historical facts or constitutional requirements? Well, yes and no. The White House did release Trump's medical records in April 2025, just 3 months after his inauguration. And according to those records, Trump is in excellent health and fully fit to serve as commander-in-chief. But here's the thing about those medical exams. They're not really designed to catch early-stage cognitive decline. They're looking for obvious physical health problems, not subtle changes in mental acuity. And they're certainly not designed to assess whether someone can handle the complex decision-making required of a president. It's like having your mechanic tell you your car is in perfect condition because the engine starts, while completely ignoring the fact that the steering wheel only turns left and the brakes make a grinding sound that can be heard from 3 blocks away. And then there's Trump's go-to excuse for everything: "I have brilliant lawyers that work for me." This has become his standard response to any question about legal or constitutional requirements. Can't remember if you need to follow the Constitution? Don't worry, the lawyers will handle it. Don't understand due process? The lawyers got this. But here's the problem with that logic. The president isn't supposed to be a figurehead who delegates all the important decisions to lawyers. The president is supposed to understand the job. The president is supposed to know what the Constitution says and why it matters. The president is supposed to be the one making the final decisions, not just rubber stamping whatever his legal team puts in front of him. The public wakes up. And apparently, the American public is starting to notice, because polling from 2024 showed that 60% of voters thought Trump was too old for a second term, and that was before these recent incidents. A full 80% said they were unsure he'd be up for serving a full second term. Think about that for a moment. 4 out of 5 Americans aren't confident that their president can handle 4 more years in office. That's not a political problem. That's a national security issue. But here's what's really interesting, and by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying. These numbers were from before the "I don't know" constitutional crisis and before the Monroe Doctrine meltdown. The polling was done when people were just looking at his general behavior and thinking, something seems off. Now that we have concrete examples of Trump struggling with basic presidential knowledge, those numbers are probably even worse. And yet here we are, with a president who might not remember what country he's running by the time his term is up. Constitutional scholars are calling this unprecedented in American history. Legal experts are using words like shocking and dangerous. Even some Republicans are starting to whisper, very quietly, that maybe, just maybe, there's a problem here. But the scary part isn't just that Trump might be experiencing cognitive decline. The scary part is that we have no real mechanism for dealing with this situation. The 25th Amendment requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president unfit. But what are the odds of that happening when the president handpicked all of those people? So here we are, folks. We've got a president who doesn't know if he needs to follow the Constitution, can't remember basic American history, and is showing multiple signs of cognitive decline that 50 medical experts are worried about. And our system of government basically requires us to just hope for the best and wait it out. This isn't about Republican versus Democrat. This isn't about conservative versus liberal. This is about basic competency and mental fitness for the most important job in the world. When the President of the United States says, "I don't know" about upholding the Constitution, we're not talking politics anymore. We're talking about a genuine crisis of leadership. And the most infuriating part? We all saw this coming. The warning signs have been there for years. The family history, the linguistic decline, the increasing confusion and repetition. But our political system is so broken, so polarized, that we can't even have an honest conversation about whether the president is mentally fit for office without it turning into a partisan screaming match. So what happens next? Your guess is as good as mine. Maybe Trump will surprise us all and have a miraculous cognitive recovery. Maybe the 25th Amendment will finally be invoked. Or maybe we'll just keep pretending everything is fine while the leader of the free world slowly forgets how to do his job. One thing's for sure, we're living through a constitutional crisis that nobody prepared for. And unlike our usual royal drama, this one doesn't have a happy ending written into the script. Thanks for watching, and remember, in a world where the president doesn't know if he needs to follow the Constitution, at least the monarchy is looking pretty stable by comparison.